Well, hello, DCO Nation. Welcome to Deadcom Outdoors Radio. This is the show where the tide set the tone and the bite tells the story. We're diving into everything saltwater inshore kayak fishing, from lures and locations to weather, water, and winning tactics. If it helps you hook up on more fish, we're talking about it right here. So grab your paddle, check your drag, and here we go. Well, hello, DCO Nation. Welcome to Deadcom Outdoors right here on the Outdoor Radio Network. But before we get going, I want to invite everybody to follow me on all of my social medias, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, YouTube for the long form videos. Matter of fact, I've got a new video that should be dropping this weekend. Went out and got on a little bit of a flounder bite that you guys can check out. So glad to see the flounder are starting to push back into Merle's Inlet. But you guys can check that out over the weekend. But I want to welcome a new affiliate to the Outdoor Radio Network, and that is ORN 1460 in the Chesapeake Bay area. Welcome to everybody who is listening there. We are expanding out. We are picking up more and more affiliates across the country. So hope you guys enjoy it. So I am ready to jump in and talk with this gentleman, Captain Matt Parrish. He is a guide in the Galveston area of Texas. And he is also the host of a podcast of the Empty Stringers podcast, and it's everything redfish, from conservation to how to find them, tactics, techniques, and guys, hands down, best one out there. If you're into redfish, he is the one, and that is the podcast you want to listen to. But Captain Matt, really appreciate you jumping on. How's the spring fishing been?
Man, thank you for those kind words. I greatly appreciate it. You know, we are in an exciting time of the year because everything starts to come back alive. And we've been in, every season brings something that's different, something that's fun, but usually by the end of that season, especially when it's summer or winter, you're kind of ready for that change. And we've hit that change here in the Galveston area. It's just kind of really starting to kick off for us. It starts sooner the lower you go down on the coast. And when I say it starts, what we're really talking about is we're talking about a large hatch of brown shrimp that floods up into the marshes. It takes them anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks to kind of get big enough for the redfish to really care about. And that will be the main target for a lot of these redfish, is what causes them to school up. And that's what brings a ton of fun to the shallow water marshlands. Now, that's not the only big hatch that we have this time of year. You're also going to see a big hatch of baby blue crabs. That's going to cause fish to tail in the grass and in the mud. You've got a big shad hatch, especially around your freshwater inlets like your rivers and your creeks. And so it's really, you kind of do whatever you want this time of year. And it can be really good. The things that will hinder us this time of year is we're going to struggle to get fish to bite, even when we find them sometimes, because they're focused on micro-sized bait. So really small crabs, really small shrimp. Sometimes you've got to really either tone your bait down, go really small and match the hatch, or you have to be so different and so annoying to that fish that he strikes out of instinct. And so we're doing some of that. If you're fishing around the rivers, you can throw crankbaits in 15 feet of water on structure and catch really heavy redfish on shad, or you can go up into 6-8 inches of water and catch schools of fish that are in the 10 to 15 fish numbers that are on shrimp. They'll be roaming in the middle of some of these back lakes. We don't see them married too tight to structure when they're feeding in schools this time of year. That's more of a fall condition.
Okay.
And so spring is all about looking for seagulls low to the water, flying in a tight formation. That's going to mean redfish in shallow water, typically on mud bottoms, mud and shell. And those fish are just vacuum cleaners. They're sucking shrimp off the bottom. And when it's on, it's on. And when it's off, it is off.
Yeah.
And so we've really, in the early part of March, it's kind of a no man's land where it can be really tough because you start to see the marshes come alive. You start to see surface activity that you haven't seen in months because in the wintertime we don't see a whole lot of surface activity. We don't see a lot of bait pulled up in the marshes. But now all of that stuff's coming back. You're seeing a ton of activity and you're not catching as many fish as you think you should. But you just have to wait a week, wait 2 weeks. It's coming on. I mean, I've had some of my best days ever on the water in early April because these fish will school up in high numbers and they'll be, you may go out one day on a full moon or a new moon and you only see 2 or 3 schools, and you may go out on another day and see 15 schools.
Yeah.
So it can be all over the place, but knowing where to target those schooling fish first can be important. So for us, the marshes that are closest to the passes that lead out to the beachfront, those are going to get your shrimp first. And
Yeah.
so it's just pure, the geography of the place where that water pushing through the passes, when the water temperature gets to be around 72, 73 degrees off the beachfront, those shrimp spawn and it pushes the eggs up into the marshes, and they will hatch anywhere from now until that water gets up into the 80s. And it'll just be wave after wave of hatches. They'll grow. Those fish will suck them off the bottom, and it'll just be, wave after wave until it gets so hot in the summer that you just don't see much of that anymore. And then we'll be back to crying over how we want fall to start,
I know, I know. So, spring usually means, up and down temperatures. Last weekend, and we were in the 80s one day, and 2 days later, we had a low that was like 34 degrees, high of 50, and we're going to creep back up into the 80s and then drop back down. So, with those fluctuating temperatures, brings a lot of wind in the spring. So, how do you deal with that, and how does that affect these fish's behavior?
Yeah, so I always try to look at the temperature swings of, and when I say temperature swings, I'm looking, I'm almost for fish behavioral purposes, I'm ignoring the air temperature and solely focused on the water temperature. And if you have a water temperature that is, let's say, a 10-degree swing either way in a 24 to 48-hour period, you might have some redfish slow their metabolism and begin to slow down and adjust for that change. They may go to deep water to do that, or they may sit perfectly still, asleep on the flats, up close to structure. I will see that happen sometimes, but by and large, in our area, we're past all that. We won't see, although we'll see big air temperature swings, it will never stay cold enough or too hot long enough to cause the water temperature to swing more than 10 degrees in one way or another. So um, water temperature this time of year, I kind of throw it out the window. I don't worry about it as much. What I will do to hide from the wind is I am looking for areas where I can find a protected shoreline that is getting a lot of influx current on an incoming tide. So a good example of that would be if I have a back lake, if I've got a strong southeast wind and I want to go fish the eastern edge of that lake because that's going to be the protected side. If if that lake is fed and it gets tidal flow near that eastern edge, then I know that I've got, depending on the size of the lake, I know I've got a good chance that there's bait, especially shrimp, that are going to get flushed up in there. And when those shrimp hit their nursery grounds in those shallow water marshes, especially on a muddy bottom, they anchor down into the mud like a you know a power pole does almost. And so when they're anchored down into that mud, they'll stay there and they won't let the tide suck them out until they grow up and they get a little bigger. So a lot of guys pay attention to the wind blown shoreline. That's kind of a thing everybody talks about.
Yeah, I
I'm
was
not
I was actually going to ask you about that. Yeah. Hmm.
I'm just not that guy. I know lots of great anglers that believe that to be true, and I just don't see it when I'm chasing schooling fish that are on brown shrimp. Where you do see some windblown shoreline success stories, baby crab hatches and shad or glass minnows, right? So
Hmm.
those they will get forced up onto the windblown shoreline. And if you're in an area where the fish are keyed in on those, maybe there's a smaller population of shrimp that hasn't grown up yet, and the fish are eating crab and glass minnows or whatever. Windblown shoreline is the ticket. That's my last resort. I'm trying to find a wind protected shoreline that has shrimp on it that are dug down into the mud because I want to sling a fly rod around and I want to sight cast these fish. And so if your best chance at sight casting is to get out of the wind, find calm water, shallow calm water, and typically your leeward shorelines that are protected, they're going to have better water clarity anyway. You get over to those windblown shorelines, you're going to have a ton of turned over muddy water, and it's a lot of blind casting. And so if I have a trip where I'm running clients that are throwing paddle tails, let's say, we may drift down a shoreline or pull down a shoreline that's windblown and have them blind cast against that shoreline. I've caught a
Okay.
lot of fish like that.
Okay. Okay. Hold that thought because I want to pick your brain on some sight casting stuff. But we're coming up to our first break. Guys, don't go anywhere. We're talking with Captain Matt Parrish, and you're listening to Dead Calm Outdoors right here on the Outdoor Radio Network. Well, welcome back, DCO Nation. We're talking with Captain Matt Parrish. He's a guide out of the Galveston Bay area in Texas, and he is also the host of a fantastic podcast, the Empty Stringers podcast, which is everything redfish. So if you guys hunt redfish, love redfish, conservation of redfish, he is the man to listen to. So before the end of the break there, we were just starting to get into some sight fishing. So I definitely want to pick your brain on that because, as a kayak fisherman, I love getting shallow. I love pushing way back, to that probably 2 feet or less, way back into those flats. So tell me about your sight fishing, especially with a fly rod.
Yeah, so I always tell folks it really you have to tailor your tactics and your trip to what you want to do, or as a guide, like what my client wants to do. This last week was a great example. I had a fly guide that only wanted to fly fish and sight cast on Thursday. I had two guys throwing paddle tails on Friday. Two very different trips. And depending on how those fish are acting, I have to pivot sometimes. And also depending on how the casting of the client is, sometimes if I know a client can't hit the spots they need to hit, I will intentionally find clear water and show them some sight casting opportunities so that they know that, hey, we saw the fish today, and they understand that, okay, I wasn't able to put the paddle tail where I needed to, right? So it takes the pressure off of me. But when I am out fishing for fun, I want to sight cast. I want to sight cast with a fly rod. And so um, if I'm doing that typically with one of my other guide buddies, or if I'm by myself, I'm finding a wind protected shoreline. I'm going to find an area that is, this time of year, it's close to the intercoastal or it's close to the open bay. It's got deep water access because I want the water that's coming in from the passes to be pushed up on those flats during the incoming tide so that I know there's going to be bait, there's going to be life there. Those redfish should be hanging around somewhere. And then once you get there, sight casting is such a slower game than your blind cast. You have to really slow down your your roll because I think when we're blind casting or let's say we're drift fishing or something like that, we're moving pretty quick. We're
Yeah.
covering a lot of ground really fast. If you do that when you're sight casting for redfish, you end up spooking redfish at the boat. They're fish that you didn't see. They snuck up in your peripheral. Bam. All of a sudden they're mud puffing out and you see their wake running off and you're like, oh man, I didn't even see that fish. And so really slowing down and scanning as focused as you can from left to right, out to in to out, covering as much ground with your eyes. And then also the biggest thing I see with a lot of people, especially clients, is when they see the fish, they're not ready. So they're not in position. They've their flies dragging the ground, or they've got too much line out, or not enough line out, or they're not because a lot of times, especially on a high wind day, you may not see that fish until he's 20 feet from the boat. So you have some days where conditions will only give you a really short shot. It's very tactical. Those can be a lot harder than your longer shots. If I see a redfish from 60 feet, that's money because he has no idea I'm there. I can flip my fly out in front of him. I can even mess that up a little bit and get it a little too close to him, and he's curious about it. If he senses there's a boat or a kayak close by, which those fish are sensing the pressure wake from your kayak and your boat
Mm-hmm.
within a 20-foot range. If they sense that, they may not know that you're there, but they know something is there. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
And when that fly or that paddle tail splashes down 6 inches from their head, they're no longer curious. You've just realized their fear for them and they're like, oh, danger, and they spook off. And so the slower you go, the more you can see those fish at that 30, 40, 50-foot mark and make a cast, the more success you're going to have and the more mistakes you're allowed to make with that fish. You see a fish with 20 feet inside that 20-foot radius, you cannot make a mistake. You have
Yeah.
to put it in the perfect strike zone. You have to do everything right, or else that fish is gonna like. I've had them turn and look at me like I knew it. I knew it was you, you know.
Yeah.
And then they swim off, and you're left wondering what you did wrong, and it's just because they felt your presence there before, before you realized it.
Yeah. Yeah. I have definitely been there before. I've been up in some flooded grass, and I can think of this one fish that I made a small cast to, and he was under 20 feet. I was right on top of him. It was one of those where I never saw him until like the last minute, but luckily he was kind of swimming away from me. So he may have felt me, but he didn't see me. But then I made a bad cast. I got it right back in and I pitched out again, maybe only about another foot and a half to the left. And I mean, he was on it. So, yeah, the margin of error when you're that close is very small. Very
Oh
small.
yeah, you have your shadow that can spook them.
Yep.
You have any noise that the boat made. There are those times when the boat's not moving, or let's say you got a little bit of a windy day, and so it can kind of tamp down your presence in the water column there, where you'll catch a fish right next to the boat. It happens. I like to think that those fish are the ones that like flunked out of high school. Like they didn't get the
I
memo,
need to
right?
find more of those. I need to find the dropouts. That's what I
Those are
need.
your favorites, right? Those
Yeah.
are that's what we all need some of those to build our confidence. But yeah, it's sight fishing is one of those things where you go, okay, I'm gonna if you start to truly track it and you're hitting 60 to 70%, you're catching 60 to 70% of the fish that you're getting shots at, you're operating at a high level. Because some fish will not, they'll give you the shot, but they're just not going to get caught. I mean, it gets to be a very tactical, tough game in some conditions, you know, and the barometer, the moon, the tide, it all affects their mood, just like it does me and you. We get
Mm-hmm.
up some mornings ready to tackle the world, and we get up other mornings and we
Nope.
pull the covers back up over our heads and we don't want to get out of bed, right? And so
Right.
they feel the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we got about 4 or 5 minutes left. I definitely want to pick your brain on what flies you're throwing, lures, and the presentations that you're using.
Yeah, so I am depending on how deep I'm fishing, which I say that it's a relative term because I'm never fishing deep. I'm a shallow water guy through and through. So the deepest I'm gonna fish is probably 2 to 2.5 feet. And if I'm fishing for in that depth of water, I'm fishing for a bull. I'm fishing for a bull red, and I'm gonna throw a big, heavy, um, usually like a redfish crack type fly, which is basically a shrimp imitation. But it'll be on a 2/0 hook. It'll have some pretty heavy dumbbell eyes because I want it to get down and in front of that fish pretty quickly.
Okay.
Um, but and I'll typically, when I'm going out, I've got that set up on a 9 weight, and then I will have my if I'm bringing all three fly setups, I'll have my 8 weight with you know, a slightly smaller hook, maybe a number, you know, a number 2 or something like that, number 4, and it'll have a similar crack pattern. 90% of what I throw on the fly is a crack pattern. I will throw a crab, especially in the spring. It can be very beneficial to throw a small crab fly. You can get them to eat that almost no matter what kind of mood they're in. Um, and then I will throw on the 7 weight, I'll throw the lightest, um, smaller crack or crab pattern. So your shrimp or crab pattern is kind of your my basic go-to. I just vary the size and the weight because on the 7 weight, if I'm throwing the 7 weight, that means I have calm water. I may be fishing ultra shallow. I may be in 6 or 8 inches of water on a calm day, and I need that fly to land softer and not scare those fish. And I want to be able to plop it down within a foot or two of that fish and not scare him. So those are my 3 setups. I don't get too caught up in color. I'll tell you the one thing that I historically do is I will tie what I like to call a hot spot on my flies. And so it's just a bright spot somewhere in the middle of the body of the fly, and it's not even for the fish, it's for me. It's so that
Hmm.
I can see the fly and I can track where I'm stripping it, because so often if you have a really natural looking fly, you lose it in your when you're stripping it back in and you're not sure if it's in front of the fish or not. So
Yeah.
that hotspot helps me know that, okay, there it is. I see it. I know the fish can see it better, and that's typically what I go for.
Okay. Okay. And real quick, you got about a minute or two. The lures. I know you throw the Caden lures, so tell us a little bit
Yep.
about that.
Yeah, I'll throw a Caden paddle tail on a 3/16 ounce jig head. I like the screw lock jig heads. Doesn't really matter what brand to me as long as it's got a screw lock on it. And I'll like to use a 3/0 hook in that scenario. Paddle tail is about 3 inches, 3 1/4 inches long. It's got a kind of a meaty body to it. It's got great action. CadenLures.com. You can pick those up. They're fantastic lures, and I'll match the color to the darkness. So if I've got super muddy water, I'm going with a dark color, maybe a black roach color with a chartreuse tail. If I've got a lighter colored water, a cleaner water, I'm going with a white or some type of natural. Tupelo honey is a great color that they have for that. I won't throw a chartreuse tail on that. So that's kind of the rundown for how I plan my lures out.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Fantastic. So, man, I really appreciate you jumping on. Tell everybody where they can find you, how they can book you up. And guys, if you're either watching on YouTube or Spotify, I've got a scroll down here at the bottom that has all of his information. But Captain Matt, let everybody know how they can book a trip with you.
Yeah. So thank you for that. You can follow me on Instagram at empty_stringers. I'm on TikTok at empty stringers. My website, actually, I just changed it. It's no longer captmattparrish.com. It's emptystringerspodcast.com. So I just went ahead and married all that stuff together. The podcast is on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you can get a podcast. It's your weekly fishing report for our area, and I think it translates well to a lot of other areas of the coast. And so yeah, I love being on here. I love the community you've built. I talked to someone from South Carolina that's a listener just last week, and so I'm planning to come and play in y'all's puddles over there here pretty soon.
Nope, there's no room. There's no room over here. No, you are absolutely welcome. I'd love to get you out there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would love to. Me and the wife are making plans. So
great. So again, I really do appreciate you coming on. I got to talk to the higher ups about getting a little bit longer show. We need to go an hour instead of 30 minutes, but that's going to be a little bit down the road. But again, I really do appreciate you, and I'll definitely have you on again.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I love being on. I wish you guys all the success in the world, and I'll holler at you later.
All right. Thank you much. Guys, remember, conservation starts with you. Release a fish for someone else to enjoy. And you've been listening to Dead Calm Outdoors right here on the Outdoor Radio Network.